So wrapping up my latest deck testing session for my Foamee Armada deck, I have 3 games against Lulu. These 3 games really aren't as exciting, I think, as the ones against Johnny, for entertainment purposes, that is. But I think these games are really informative because I actually make some very key misplays in these games that I really want to highlight as once as I continue to play against better players, maybe some more competitive players, try out some tournaments. These sorts of misplays are what's going to lose me games in those sort of settings. So I think it's very important to reflect on them and really explain why they were misplays, what were the other plays I could, or the more optimal plays I could have made. Also, shout out to Lulu for letting me record and post these, especially since he is a fairly new player, still trying to learn the rules, still trying to figure out what strategies are better than others and refine his deck. So I really respect and appreciate him allowing that to be out on the internet. Also of note, this will be going up after my deck profile, and as you'll notice, especially the sideboard is not the same as in that deck profile, and that's because this was filmed before the deck profile. Also, the deck profile and this game was filmed before the release of Galaxy, therefore that's why I did not talk about it in that video, nor have I tested it yet. I don't really have a concrete opinion on the card as it doesn't obviously power creep or push out some other component of my deck, as at a surface level, it does kind of what Mustache and Sorlet are there to do. It does have some extra utility that I think is worth exploring, but I don't know what I would cut from the deck or if it's even strong enough to cut out certain cards from my deck to include them. So that might come in a later update as I continue to test the deck, but I'll kind of mention a bit more of that at the end of the video. But with that being said, let's get right into it. So I can't remember who won the dice roll. Unfortunately, the beginning of this game got cut off. All I can say is that I had to do a mulligan, hence you see the Taratlus up in the corner with one other spirit that we cannot see. And also why I just know my Lulu goes first, even though I don't know who won the dice roll. So my opponent starts it off with 2 fire for a Hephaestus here. So already seeing a fire deck, and he uses that ability to search out one. So while he grabs that, I just also wanted to mention, looking at my hand, the mulligan was the correct play. Nectar of the Gods to grab more, Sorlet and Mustache to attack over stuff, Pika to answer runes, Denver to help, really great. So my opponent grabs a Scythe here, so already very interesting. Looks like he's running a strong Earth and Fire package, so I have to be aware that he's going to be able to increase his attack very high, has access to stuff like Earthquake, as well as having burn stuff. So I need to be very cognizant of that. So I end up Nectaring the Gods here to draw into more cards. Another Nectar of the Gods. I consider playing it, but since I have plenty of cards that I can play to start trying to break apart my opponent's board, I choose not to. So here's actually my first misplay. So I'm trying to think how I can break down the board, and my thought process concludes with Peliquarius plus Demeter to attack over Tectoros, because Peliquarius can search me a Foamee, so I can, so pretty much what I can do is I can kind of set up a really sticky board with Foamee next turn, which is what I end up doing. I Peliquarius, grab the Foamee, and then play out Demeter. The problem is I didn't properly Tectoros in that its effect sees both sides of the field. So by doing this play this way, I end up just crashing into the Tectoros. However, if I had just enchanted Demeter with one spirit, it wouldn't. Tectoros would have only been at 4 attack as the Demeter would have gone away. And Lulu lets me kind of take back this play. I choose not to take back the Peliquarius since I already searched out the Foamee. And in hindsight, I kind of wish, just because I feel like I'm at the point where if I make a mistake, I just need to own up to it and not kind of take stuff back. Because I do have a pretty good understanding of what this deck wants to do. So something I wish I had done differently, but nothing I can do about it now. So moving over to my opponent's turn. So Peliquarius, I do that Demeter play, so sack the Demeter, Peliquarius to 3 attack to attack over it. And it goes over to my opponent's turn where he plays a Nectar of the Gods. That's the one thing I meant to say. What do I think I should have done instead? I should have just enchanted Sorlet or Mustachian and attacked over it, is really what the ideal play. I think Sorlet would have been just a bit better with that Wind Spirit there, though I think there's a case to say Mustachian save Sorlet if I need to change stuff for defense, since I see a high attack increasing stuff. But also with Scythe there, it still increases defense. So I really don't know which one to say. I just know it would be one of those two. And since the game's kind of moving forward, I don't want to get caught up in trying to really think about which one would have been the better play. I just know the play I made was not correct. So my opponent ends up playing a Nectar of the Gods. He Pandacenes to get back the Nectar of the Gods to play it again, and then plays a Folio Forest and sets 1. Now, I think this is a very important discussion to have, especially when thinking about your plays in your deck building, because that play gives you a lot of card advantage, yes, but at the same time, it means that in this case, he gave up his normal enchant to just be able to draw more cards. And with the resource system like Elestrals has, I think it's very important to consider the balance between tempo and card advantage. How good is one or the other? And really figure out, I think the best players will be determined how they kind of balance out that sort of tempo aspect, keeping up on board with being able to also draw cards, see outs and such. But here I end up, once he passes the turn over to me, I end up just enchanting a Foamee and attacking for 2 because I do have a pretty sticky board here with a Foamee. It's going to require an Earthquake to answer that, and which if he has it, he has it. I could have P-Gusted here to bait the rune, but I also figured that if he had a counter rune, he could use it on one of these anyway, and I could save the P-Gust to pop, say, like Folio if need be, Scythe, just other way, just save it for better answers since I was ahead on the board anyway. So I ended up going Equilinx and attaching a Scythe to it, so now Equilinx is up to 7 attack, so pretty strong here, and ends up attacking over the Peliquarius, not letting it get the Foamee float, so I don't have advantage on board. Really great play here. Recurring Spirit, so now Scythe pretty much just cost 1. So going back to my turn, I have 2 Nectar of the Gods, so I can start drawing more cards. But I also have Sorla here is not actually an out because of Folio. So here I could, my best, yeah, I use Nectar of the Gods because I don't really have an out in hand. I now have the Capricorn, so I could ascend an attack over it as I have one more attack, but with that face down counter rune, that's a bit iffy here. So here I switch Foamee to defense and just play out a P-Gust in defense to get rid of that counter rune. Since I'm still ahead on the board, I figure this is a pretty good play. I haven't seen Earthquake yet or any removal from my opponent, so there's a chance I could still clear the board with that. But at the same time, since I haven't seen it yet, and I believe my opponent also made a comment about not really liking Earthquake too much, so I think here, while in hindsight, I feel a bit bad for using that information. I think I just did that play without even thinking. I was just like, oh, okay, well, I don't even remember consciously thinking that. I think I passively absorbed that information. But here it lets me, since I cleared the counter rune to stall a turn, my opponent couldn't deal with both Foamee and Peliquarius, I'm able to ascend up into the Capricorn to be able to attack over it. Nectar of the Gods to see more, because I really just want to see my counter runes to try to protect Capricorn a little bit, as my opponents can definitely reach up to high attack here. So I got unfortunately no counter runes, I just see Globby and Aphoros here, which aren't bad to see. I mean, I don't really need the Globby. The Aphoros not too bad if I need to start drawing more cards to dig for more stuff to secure my board space. But here I'm just able to attack over the Equilinx with the Capricorn and recur a Foamee here, which is exactly what I end up doing. Oh, I actually play an Ambrosia. That's right. I was getting low on my spirit count, so I just send back 3 water. I have another Ambrosia if I need to tutor back specific spirits. But that way I just don't randomly die to eruptions as well, as I don't know if my opponent plays that yet, and I would rather not allow my opponent to just kind of cheese his way out of here when I can afford to play Ambrosia here. So yep, do the Capricorn attack over Foamee. So now my board is really threatening since I've kind of taken the risk and I'm pretty sure my opponent doesn't run Earthquake based on what he said. I am able to kind of safely set up this board that's going to be hard to deal with, as if even if my opponent doesn't run Resting on Your Laurels, which I don't think he ever mentioned, it only really destroys Foamee, and then he still has to deal with the Capricorn. And 8 attack is a lot to deal with, even with a Folio and a Demeter up. It's going to be quite the challenge. Like my opponent's, the easiest way is just with another Equilinx, so that's one, but my opponent would need to have it as well. And it's not impossible to definitely see, but having already seen one, it means that my opponent's less likely to have another one in hand. So here, I think my opponent's just trying to debate, like, how can he out this board? I am ahead, even though I don't have any counters to kind of protect myself. But he ends up going Drataya here, and the Drataya is, with 2 attack, he actually purposely put an attack because there is a way he can get over my Capricorn, as we'll see here shortly, and that's with grabbing a Scythe here, because Scythe plus Folio plus Demeter will get Drataya up to that 8 attack my opponent needs to be able to attack over the Capricorn. And with the Demeter up, sure, it costs him the Scythe in hand, but at the same time, he pretty much gets back the 2 spirits he used to play the Scythe, which is really nice. So Ambrosia here also, I think my opponent had the same idea, just to make sure he doesn't die as quickly as well, throwing back, I believe, 2 Tratless and a Pyro as to make sure he can still play some of his fire runes and Celestial. I haven't seen any fire Celestial, so it seems like some fire runes. But here, just kind of debating, and also with that gets the 2 draw from Drataya, and then I think there's a bit more debating, just double checking numbers and such before he makes that Demeter play. But here, actually, I wanted to quickly talk about my thoughts on Drataya. Oh, he has the Nectar of the Gods, so he plays Nectar of the Gods to draw 2. Again, I'm noticing my opponent really favors that card advantage, seeing more answers and such, which is understandable. I did the same thing when I was first starting out. And kind of same thing with Drataya there. I see Drataya, while not, I don't rate it very competitively high, as its stat line's all right. The 4 defense is fine, but it also doesn't proactively really engage with the board, which I think is huge in this format, especially with no wide board destruction cards currently existing. But also because the effect here is requires 2 cards to get the value. Sure, it's fantastic value. Just playing Ambrosia, you get an extra draw too. Awesome. But with Rattaya not really impacting the board too much, I don't think it's very great for competitive play. But with that being said, though, I do think it's phenomenal in this case for new players learning the game, as it kind of teaches them like combos and really assessing different elements of the game, such as with card draw value, and then trying to leverage it against tempo, board advantage, and such. So I don't think Dratai needs to be an amazing card. I think it does what it needs to, and being just a phenomenal beginner card to kind of teach them the game as well. So here my opponent does make the Demeter play. He actually 3 Spirit Enchanted it. So he ends up doing that and then crashing the Drataya into the Capricorn. So definitely strong, but I still have my Foamee here, which is nice. So, and yeah, I still have my Foamee here, which is nice. So I'm still up on board advantage. Going into my turn, and here I actually have a lot of plays I can make. I draw the second Capricorn, but not very good here since my opponent doesn't have an Elestral up on board. So I think the best play here would have been to throw up a Mustachian, as that would have just made my board even stickier. It would have been really hard to deal with. And the reason I say that over, say, Pelacrace is I believe I am out of Wind Spirits, and I'd rather save my Ambrosia to tutor back specific stuff for, like, say, an Earthquake if need be. But here I actually choose to go for the Globby instead, my thought process being, with Globby, I would get a draw, I would force my opponent down to 1 spirit and Spirit Deck, therefore only has the 1 spirit, as well as the 2 spirits for runes from Folio Force and Demeter. And I thought that just put me in a more commanding position than any other play, leaving it with 2 spirits, pretty much trying to reduce the options. My thought being, sure, even if he can play out an Elestral that can destroy Globby, I still have plenty of answers on my next turn, and he would be out of spirits at that point for enchanting Elestrals, that is. But turns out I completely didn't consider him having another Ambrosia in hand, and in which case this play here actually becomes really punishing for me, as we'll see. And as if now that he can attack over the Glob, if Globby's not hard to attack over with Folio and Demeter up, and you'll see that my opponent, I believe, plays Equilinx, which pretty much deals with that itself, because what we end up discussing, he almost used Demeter on Equilinx, but he said, wait, why don't you just Nexus, target no runes, since the only one would be left would be Folio Force, and you don't want to destroy that. That way Equilinx would be at 6 attack with 2 spirits on it, so just a stronger buff lasting longer than it would have been if you just increased the attack of Equilinx. And yeah, he ends up doing that play here, really punching that Globby, so now I'm behind on board. When if I just played 2 Elestrals, I wouldn't have been behind on board. Sure, he would have been able to attack over. He probably wouldn't have attacked over the Foamee. He probably would have attacked over, say, Mustachian, in which case, if I flipped, he could have just used Demeter's effect. So it would have been, he would have easily been able to deal with it, but one of them would have always been left up. And that point, I would have been able to go like Capricorn to attack over it. I could have possibly gone into a Globby as well to try to close out the game if need be. I mean, I would have even had a Sorlet there. Just actually, I don't think Sorlet would have been. No, Sorlet wouldn't have been enough. I mean, I could have Ambrosia'd for a Sorlet. No, it would not have been enough. So if I had played, in that case, I would have had to ascend up into Capricorn. So just kind of some theoretical plays, but point being is I would have been in a more commanding board state to kind of do what I did that misplay turn a turn later, and it would have just been more effective. Versus here now I have to crash a Mustachian to get rid of the Equilinx, and sure, my opponent's still running out of spirits. He doesn't have the Demeter up anymore, but at the same time, he now has advantage on the board as he gets to throw something out and attack right away. So definitely not the best play. There's a better play if I had just gone wide on the board, as going wide on the board a lot of times is the most effective, especially with no mass board removal. So my opponent, normal chance of Drataya, attacks my Spirit Deck for 1, passing it over to me, and even still here, I still have plenty of answers. I can easily just Sorlet, which I believe is what I do. I use Ambrosia, and then I throw back. I believe I throw back 2 Wind Spirits here. My thought process being now I can regular enchant a Sorlet, and if the Sorlet survives, I can have a Wind Spirit to use its effect, or I can use that Wind Spirit on a P-Gust. as I don't think I'll need too many. Like the 3 water spirits should be fine to close out the game. I really just need to grab control of the board again and deplete the rest of his spirits as I am ahead. So I just go Sorlet, attack over, and he expends the spirit from his spirit deck when he's not supposed to. We do correct that, so he still technically does have 1. But as we will see here, the best my opponent can do is just crash into the Sorlet with the help with the Folio Forest, and then he's out of spirits, and then it just leaves me needing to normal enchant 1 to be able to win the game. So it goes Equilinx, crashes into the Sorlet, and there just I just showed that I have plenty of ways to normal enchant, and that's game right there. So my opponent kind of showing the hand there. Don't know why he didn't. Oh, he didn't have the spirits for shield. That's why. But anyway, let me skip ahead to when I start siding stuff out for that discussion. So looking at my side deck here, not a bit of a mess for sure, but of note, the cards that I end up siding into are Tsunami, as it is a cheaper option than Poison Tip Arrow to stall out my opponent's attacking Elestrals, and switching to defense usually makes them more vulnerable. So, though not as much in this matchup since Scythe and I keep calling Folio, don't I? Foloi Forest buff defense as well. So but still, I think it's nice as I wasn't feeling like I had too much trouble being able to attack over my opponent's stuff. So I do think just having the cheaper option of the Tsunami is better here. So I end up switching out my Poison Tip Arrows for those Tsunamis, as my opponent, I've not confirmed it's only a Fire Earth deck, meaning that there's no Water Surprise. And my opponent isn't running a sideboard, so I don't have to worry about that either. I also side in, I know, the 3 Tornado, because Tornado is phenomenal against a deck that likes setting up all those Divine Runes, the artifacts, the stadiums. It just can punish them real easy for cheap, and again, still help me be able to more easily attack over my opponent's stuff. I also, since I'm including the Tornadoes, I switch out 2 Earth Spirits with the 2 Lycris from my sideboard, as I will need more to still be able to use all my win cards. And I believe what I cut out here is the Demeter, because it only helps my opponent with stuff like Tectoros. So I see no reason to include Demeter when pretty much the Tornadoes should be able to help me. I don't need to gain attack if I can just lower my opponent's attack, was kind of the mentality of being able to switch out like Demeters for Tornadoes and such. And I believe I cut Poison Tip Arrows for those Tsunamis as well. And since I cut the Demeter, that's why I can cut the Earth Spirits for the Lycris. So I'll just kind of skip ahead. It was easier to discuss from that screen. And I believe I only side in 2 Tsunami for the 2 Poison Tip. But we move on to this next game here. My starting hand, my opponent's going first. He got choose and chose to go first, and the starting hand's quite interesting. Peliquarius to help search out, great. P-Gust to answer runes, great. Earthquake to try to catch up on board if need be, great. Nectar of the Gods to draw 2, awesome. 2 of them, but also since I didn't have to mulligan, not too bad. And I draw into Mostation, another great card to kind of get ahead on board, especially in this scenario here where my opponent only set 1. That means that I can easily just enchant a Mostation, and it's a pretty safe card on board. I also could enchant just Foamee, but I choose to P-Gust here to pop the rune. So here, I believe I made that choice, and it's Gorgon's Gaze, so yep, good idea. It's great to pop it, of course, but at the same time, I don't actually think it would have been a bad idea to actually enchant Mostation here and try to bait it, especially since with P-Gust, I could save it for other stuff. I think the idea was here, I just kind of wanted to take advantage of my opponent didn't normal chant and just grab tempo on board a bit quicker with the P-Gust, hoping I'd just draw into more P-Gust or the Tornado to be able to answer the other runes. But looking back on it, I actually think it would have been better to normal enchant a Mostation or a Foamee first, especially since I never saw any Earthquakes last turn, just to kind of bait the counter rune instead. I don't think the P-Gust is necessarily a wrong move, as it definitely sets me up ahead on tempo on board, but at the same time, I don't know, since this deck, I haven't seen Eruptions either, it's not very aggressive, I don't think it was very necessary to. I could have taken the slower turn and tried to build up into the control a bit more. So here my opponent's just deciding what to do, has the 4 cards in hand, he ends up expending 1 to... Oh, here we're just switching over host. Oh, he was just trying to decide which spirit to expend P-Gust. So once the game loads back in, I'm host. Let me skip ahead just a little bit to see what my opponent does. So yeah, he draws for turn. That makes more sense. Yeah, spend either spirit for the P-Gust attack. And let's see what my opponent does. So he expends 1 to draw 1. So still no Elestrals on board. So the P-Gust ends up working out in my favor because he just passes here. I forget what I was checking here in the rule book, but definitely very interesting kind of situation here. I think In other matchups, I could have easily been punished for that P-Gust play, but ends up working out here. So this is again where I got really lucky, despite looking back on it, I don't think it's the most optimal play in a lot of games. But here, drawn to the Tsunami, finally seeing some counter runes. Should be nice just to kind of secure my advantage on board right now. And I believe here I just enchant a Foamee. And looking at my hand, that's definitely, I think, the best play. Again, haven't seen any removal, so just kind of setting up a P-Gust and a Foamee on board for it to be super sticky and have 2 threats to deal with will feel very good. And I do have the Tornado as well, which is quite nice to start outing stuff. I think that's the other reason. Oh yeah, I would have drawn that off to the Nectar. I think that's the other reason why I was okay playing out P-Gust here for tempo was because of Tornado. But again, I still don't change my assessment that I should have just enchanted Mustache or Foamee last turn instead and bait out instead. So here, another, I think, misplay on my part. I set Earthquake, Tsunami, and the was the final one, Tornado, and then attack for 2. I think I should have set Nectar of the Gods and Tsunami only because I'm already head on board, so I don't think the Tsunami is as important here. I'd rather just hold on to the Tornado and Earthquake in case I needed to get caught up. I think the idea was here just to protect stuff, kind of if my opponent goes for some rune destruction to kind of make it harder for them to choose. But here it actually ends up blocking up my board, and again, holding in hand just means they're safer, and there's such great reactionary tools. I don't think it was that great play. So I end up still having board as my opponent just played Ambrosia, Pandacine to get back at Ambrosia to try to catch up. Again, definitely a really great survival play, but at the same time, how are you advancing your board state? I think that's a very important question to ask yourself, as those 3 he just recurred, I just attack over them right away. So I think that's a very important thing to also keep in mind when playing the game, and something that, like, I remember having to learn this myself as well. So understandable wanting to make plays like that. You're like, oh my gosh, survivability is great. You really don't kind of understand all the nuances until you start practicing it, which again, honestly, in this situation here, makes me very thankful that Lulu was open for me to record this because I have a lot of respect for people who are willing to show when they're still trying to learn as well. So he does the same Pandacine Ambrosia play, so same comment on that, except he's falling even further behind on board. And here, I drew in the shield, and here's where I get punched from my back row. So, and the real reason I wanted to highlight my misplays as well as kind of making some commentary on stuff my opponent's done is to show that the only reason I'm not getting punished for these plays is because my opponent is still trying to learn. And I think that's huge to understand and also to recognize as I think it would stink if I just said, oh, my deck's working wonderfully. It was just running over this guy. And again, as a competitive play, I'm going to get destroyed if I'm not still paying attention to these misplays even in these games. But anyhow, moving forward, what I was saying, I believe here, yeah, I played another Nectar of the Gods, drew another Tornado, Enchanted Mustachian, again, just attacking for 4. So these Ambrosias my opponent's played are not keeping up with my damage output. He needs a way to start answering board, but it might be just a bit too late to kind of adequately address this, as I just have so many answers between those Nectar of the Gods drawing me, getting ahead on board. I've got an Earthquake, I've got a Shield, I've got 2 Tornadoes. I'm just frankly so far ahead in terms of board advantage, and I've been keeping up with the card advantages as well, which is the kind of crazy thing here. So just all those reasons for why I'm not being punished for those misplays. So here, opponent passes the turn, I believe. Yeah, my opponent passes turn. I send it to Aphros because I have so many answers. I don't think I really need the Mustachian here, and I want to keep up the Foamee for floating purposes. I end up drawing into another Foamee. So, I mean, arguably, I could have just, since I was so far ahead, kept it the Mustachian for answers, which in hindsight probably would have been the better play. I don't think I needed the float effect as much when I was so far ahead on board. So that was another slight misplay. I should have ascended Foamee into Aphros, but the draw 2 still very important, as I would have also seen another Foamee in hindsight. But just be able to keep up the card advantage just means that even as my opponent starts trying to answer my board, I'll hopefully see most of my answers. So my opponent ends up playing out Drataya, can definitely start crashing into stuff, and is easy to get over the board as my entire board is just to attack. The Faloi Forest just kind of guarantees that, as he is able to attack over stuff. Ends up throwing in defense actually to stall out instead of starting to attack over stuff, which is kind of a good play because I could have easily punished it if I had a shield face down, which I think is the reason my opponent really went for that. But even then, I have Earthquake here. I have Tornado here to start dismembering my opponent from trying to come back here. And you'll see I do exact that. Bounce that back to hand with the tornado. And my opponent's spirit count should be pretty low at this point. So I'm just here trying to close out the game. I have another tornado if I need to. And then just Earthquake the Drataya, bounce it back to hand. And here I can also use Aphros' ability again to draw 2 just to make sure I still see plenty of my threats. And I can also easily re-enchant to deal more. So I see Capricorn Sorlet, not too useful here as I see no reason to ascend into Sorlet or Capricorn in this scenario. So I set 2, I set Ambrosia for bait, and I finally be able to set my shield as well. I think the Ambrosia for bait is correct here as I have 2 Ambrosia in hand. And here I do almost misplay. I almost enchant Foamee here, and then I realize that I have a Wind Spirit to enchant Picas, and I can get rid of the Feloy Forest, just really dumb, like just making sure I have absolute control of the board here. And that's what I end up doing. And really at this point, my opponent can't come back from this as I've just gone way too far ahead. My board's too hard to dismantle, and I am stripping his spirit deck of everything except, I believe, 1 or 2. Looks like 2 there. So opponent draws for turn, and I believe at this point my opponent just folds because, yeah, he didn't really... I bounced back the Gorgon's Gates, which was nice, would have slowed down, but with no Elestrals to play on board, he really needed to get stuff to stick, and Centaur just wasn't good enough. So with that, I actually end up winning the match, though looking back on it, I think that I played very poorly overall, while Lulu did a great job just trying to figure out, just test out different stuff and really learn the game. So if anything, Lulu was the real winner here. So Lulu and I are actually having a lot of fun, so we decided to play a third game before I had to go. So with this hand that I drew into, I believe, I can't remember who won the dice roll. Actually, I could figure it out if I wanted to. Let's play it back. So dice roll, I rolled a 1, and my opponent, so my opponent won the dice roll, chose to go first, which I'm fine with. I would have chose to go second anyway. And I choose not to mulligan this hand. While definitely not amazing, I have Poison Tip Arrow to kind of start answers up. And since this is a new game, I revert back to my original deck, not my sideboard. And the 2 Demeter lets me attack over stuff. Aphros, not amazing, but I also see some place to draw stuff here. Sorlet, not too bad. But with Aphros Demeter here, I can actually misenchant a Demeter to use Aphros' ability to draw 2. So not too bad, and have another Demeter to be able to attack over it. So I go for that play. My opponent ends up Clovying, which isn't bad to draw 1 card, though the stat line definitely leaves much to be desired. I can easily answer it. So I go my Nexus play and actually jump the gun, forgetting to ask my opponent if they had a response. So that one's my bad. Definitely getting tired from all these games, but Gorgon's Gaze just sets down that Aphros play. And here's another huge misplay on my part. I completely, for whatever reason, I'm like, oh yeah, stops the Nexus. So then I just continue to play to enchant the other Demeter to attack over Clovy with it, which forgetting that Aphros can't attack here. So I end up just here. Lulu gives me the option to like take back the Demeter and such, but at this point I'm just like, no, I made this misplay. I should know better than this. I'm just owning it. So I just leave. I don't revert the play at all, so I really just lost out on 1 spirit because of that. So is what it is. Definitely huge, great way to just kind of learn and just be like, hey, don't make these stupid mistakes in the future as well. So I kind of already explained this. Let me just kind of skip ahead as I make those plays. I still set 1 and I'm able to... I still have the Poison Tip Arrow set, so I just end up passing over that. I don't think we're quite at that point, so let me... Yeah, here I made the mistake of attacking. We realized that was a mistake. I think Ratkeen I think Ratkeen pointed it out. So let me just skip ahead. Yep, so my opponent's turn, he ends up setting 1 when it gets to his turn. And here, I'm trying to remember what he did. He either Scythed or Feloyed Forest. I do believe he ended up re-enchanting also to draw 1 off of the Clovy. And while normally I wouldn't say that's a great play, I'm pretty sure based on what his hand was, it was the best play he could make, as he didn't have any other Elestrals to enchant. So that one was fair. Oh, he equips Hammer to it. So yeah, Hammer here, just the little bit of attack he needed on Aphros. And here, yeah, it doesn't have any protection effects. Here's actually another huge misplay I made. I forgot Poison Tip Arrow is just on when it is enchanted, not when it's normal enchanted. Whenever you put it also includes this enchant here. I should have used it here because it would have protected the Aphros, and I would have been able just to deal with the Clovy right then and there. But because I didn't here, my opponent's able to attack over the Aphros, sets up a Hephaestus as well, so it's like a 4 attack Clovy, I believe. And now Clovey also has a protection effect as well. It isn't too relevant in my deck as I don't have Elestral based effect destruction, but still, just my opponent really punishing me for my misplays, setting up a powerful stop here. So I end up going Sorlet, figuring I can just attack over it. It's fine, but with that set counter rune, it's not actually fine, as my opponent flips up Gorgon's Gaze yet again, meaning now he has a chance to deal with my Sorlet. And with that Clovey out on board with the Festus and Hammer, probably won't be too difficult if he has another way to increase that Clovey's attack. So again, just really being punished for misremembering what Poison Tip Arrow does. So really not doing well in these matches here. So he ends up ascending into Centarbor, and here I Poison Tip Arrow. And it's still fine as it deals with a Centarbor, but I believe it's also around this time that I realize, oh, I should have done that on the Clovey. It would have saved me my Aphros on board, and I would have been able to draw cards. Because right now I just have a Globby and Capricorn, which are dead in hand. And if I can't grab back the board state, which this play does not actually, because Centarbor can still attack over Sorlet, I'm just falling. I'm really not taking advantage of my deck's ability to get ahead on board. I'm allowing myself to fall behind here. So I believe we had a bit more discussion about the Poison Tip Arrow interaction as well. So let me skip ahead. So yeah, Centarbor attacks over it. I expend 2 spirits from the attack, as well as one additional one for Poison Tip Arrow to get rid of the Centarbor. And now it's back to my turn where I really need to see a 1 spirit Elestral. So I don't remember if I actually draw into it, as it's been like 5 days since I recorded this. So let's see, my draw for turn, I get Tadpuff, which funny enough is actually a very interesting card to start answering the board. As there are no counter runes up, I can safely go into Globby, beat my opponent down for 3 spirits from their spirit deck, while also drawing a card. So Tadpuff really being probably the best draw here. I'm debating whether or not it's like worth it, because it is a high risk play, but at this point, I don't think I'm in a position where I can afford to not make a play if it's available to me, and be able to just draw more cards while also whittling away my opponent's stuff, I think is just too important not to. I believe here's when I was like, oh, I should have done that. That would have been such a better play. And point out to Lulu just to be able to, so he understands, so he can learn from this as well. So yeah, let me just skip ahead to when, yep, so I do the Tadpuff play. Globby, I end up enchanting Globby, draw the 1, and I draw into another Tadpuff. And here, I actually remember originally thinking like, oh, I don't need that. I need one of my other 1 spirit Elestrals so I can start doing stuff because they're such high risk plays. And it's like, I mean, I could still go up into Capricorn, but I also don't have a Foamee setup. So again, it doesn't feel as good because part of the reason I like Capricorn is it lets me go wide on board. And without a Foamee, I can't do that. So my opponent uses Hephaestus's ability again to grab a Scythe. And here I'm just checking my spirit count. I'm getting pretty low here. Also realized put the Tadpuff in the wrong pile. You'll see that in a second. My opponent actually has the Equilinx out to Globby, which is huge here. That Scythe here, putting it at 6 attack to attack over the Globby, really strong, and be able to recur 1 spirit as well. And that, yeah, switch back to Tadpuff properly. So over to me, I draw into the Foamee here, but funny enough, Tadpuff actually ends up being relevant here with no counter runes. Capricorn is my way out to this Equilinx, so I actually do end up doing that exact play. I'm forced to misenchant as I've run out of water spirits, which is fine. I don't need Capricorn's ability here. I just need that 8 attack to attack over, get rid of the Equilinx and the Scythe, and that's exactly what I do. And here my opponent expends 2 buys, like, no, you just expend 1. You're subtract the spirit count. So that's something I definitely notice new players having to get used to, and understandably so. There's a lot going on here with what you have to keep track of between what deals damage, what doesn't attack, all that. It's understandable. But here, still though, just kind of, my opponent ends up folding here as he has no way of getting over the Capricorn because he has no way to defend his Elestrals on board. So I just kind of start attacking over it. And with that, I forget what his spirit count was, but it was small enough where it just really wasn't worth continuing this game, for my opponent at least. So I hope you all enjoyed this gameplay. While not as exciting, I think it's a very educational one, especially for new players and also players who are trying to learn more advanced strategies, as I hope that my I was about to say misfortune, not misfortune, my just poor plays in these 3 games, I think is fantastic to learn off of for anyone watching. With all that being said, though, as I said at the beginning of the game, Galaxy was released after that. I might release some. I do want to test that in my deck, but I don't know how much gameplay footage I'll actually release until we get to more of an official release, as I've been building this deck up for 3 weeks now, and I've had a blast doing so, but I kind of want to start building up another deck and showing that process again, as the point behind these videos is showing kind of the evolution of the understanding of both the game as well as building a deck to kind of help people get a better idea of how different strategies to build decks. And plus, I just think it's very fun to do so and really kind of show that process online. But if there are any other misplays I did not directly call out in this, I would love to hear about them in the comments below, as this has kind of been my main focus with these games, is learning from these misplays. Also look forward to the next Elestral deck I am building out. I don't want to spoil it here, but I do have the list built. I believe I have filmed a deck profile for it. I just need to actually test it. So look forward to that coming out in the near future.